Episode 3. Your Rights, Their Runaround, GIPA and the Art of the Stonewall. Welcome back, and just a quick recap on last week's episode. My good friend Maree Duffy is here with the wisdom and insight from... So last week we spoke about the CEO role, and we touched on the 4:30 inquiry here in the Shoalhaven. We spoke about the ITAC inquiry into Parramatta and the power that resides with CEOs and how it can all go horribly wrong, and how it looks at the moment from what we're seeing across New South Wales. The going horribly wrong is not an isolated case. It seems to be just about everywhere, largely built up, as I think we again touched on last week, that where you have a system and you have humans involved, they will look for self-interest and they will look. So we spoke at the end of that session about the GIPA Act. And for those who are going, what the hell are you talking about? Effectively, it's the Government Information Public Access Act 2009 of New South Wales. And this very much follows the Commonwealth line of the Freedom of Information Act. And quite often, what you find is government or oppositions are very keen on this stuff until they get into power, then they're not so keen on it at all. So this is an act that gives people the right, legal right, to make application, to get information that effectively they've paid for as taxpayers or ratepayers. So we said last week about the state government effectively owning all the activities of council under the Local Government Act. They also recognise the power of the people who pay for this stuff and encourage release for transparency in the building of democracy. That's the theory. The practical application is somewhat different. So the Act has 4 access tracks, and Maree's going to speak about her experience with this in a moment. So firstly, as I say, the information is our information. So it's gathered, processed, acted on by council, but essentially it's because we voted people in and we pay rates. So that's why we should have access to it. So there's a proactive release where the local government can release whatever it wants, put it up on its website, do whatever it wants. Now, as you would realise, if it's bad news, they don't really want to do that. They do want to put out good news and spin. That's the fact about public release. There's an open access where documents must be made available, and these sort of things are annual reports where other people have made a GIPA application and it's public. There is a register of those documents. So the fact is, if you release one piece of information, it's effectively released into the public and anyone can access it, not just the person who made the application. And I'll come back to that a bit later. An informal release, you can actually, under the Act, you can just ask under the Act for the council or any government agency to release information. It's an informal process, and they can say, yeah, mate, no worries. Here you go. No cost, no whatever. Now, that does happen. I've been banned from that process under my council. I will not consider any informal release to me. I've got to go the formal path any time, and that's one of the ways they start messing with your head when you get a bit nosy on information. And the 4th one is the formal application. And that formal application comes with a whole set of legal mechanisms and processes that must be followed by council. But again, we're going to talk about how they can appear to be doing that, but in fact, putting roadblocks in front of you at every chance. Absolutely. Now, I say that not as some sort of crazy person who's anti-government. I used to be an FOI delegate in my department, and I became very skilled at thinking about what should be released and what shouldn't be released, and about timing. Quite often, it's good to delay information until a particular government gets over some hump, and then you can release it and it blows away. It's not really important. So there's a lot of politics and power issues that run about when you release information. Most residents know about the formal track and probably think it's all too complicated. Largely, it is complicated.
But very informative.
You can buy it for $15. But if you got a good call, send me an email and I'll probably send it to you for free. So don't get too wrapped up, but I had to get it out there. So there's a lot of technical stuff in the GIPA Act. So, Maree, as a former councillor, what are your views and experiences with the GIPA Act?
I think the first issue is people aren't familiar that they have a FOI type process available to them when they're unhappy about something that's happened at council. They pretty much keep it on the down low. They don't go advertising that there's a process you can use. It costs you a few dollars, but if you're interested enough, it's certainly worth putting them in. You go online and you give away your firstborn in order to be able to even have the GIPA looked at. and then a group of bureaucrats within the council have a look and decide whether it is going to be approved to go forward, or whether it just gets a letter from council that says your GIPA is not going to be referred to for the following reasons, which are convoluted and often don't make sense to the person who put in the GIPA. But perhaps the one that I am most concerned about in our instance was an episode of, and I'm sure the particular person who's concerned, who I won't name, but will be okay with me sharing this with you. It was an incident that occurred between two people at a polling booth, and one person, and these were aspiring councillors, let's be honest about who they were, and one person pushed another out of the way to speak to a potential voter. It was very deliberate. It was very obvious. A number of people, commented on it. And then a police investigation began after a claim of assault, and the police were investigating. But what they wanted, apart from a few witnesses, was the CCTV. So the council was asked by both the police and the person concerned who had been assaulted for the CCTV that was available on the day of the polling, because it was at the council chambers out the front where this particular polling booth was. And of course, there's cameras there. The council were not keen to provide the CCTV, and it became a bone of contention. And the police said, without it, we can't move forward. So the onus was upon the victim to get hold of this CCTV. So he lodged a GIPA. Anyway, they stalled. They did everything they possibly could not to provide the evidence of what had occurred. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute it did occur, it didn't occur. That's not my place. I'm simply saying how difficult the GIPA process was to obtain that CCTV. Eventually, they relented and they said that they wouldn't hand it over, but that he could go and take a look at the evidence. I'm not sure what that was going to achieve. So he took what he could get, and they reviewed a very short. Now, they didn't allow them the whole of the CTV of the event. They only provided him with an edited piece, which provided nothing. So it was a very unfortunate process. And I've spoken to a lot of residents who have had very unsuccessful GIPA applications. The process, as I said, is convoluted. It often ends up in nothing, and it just leaves people extremely angry at the process. It is problematic.
This show's not I on the police, but I'm amazed. So listen to that. The police have got search warrant powers to just come and seize it. They've got powers under various acts to go, look, I don't care what you want to do, council. Here's the search warrant. Give me the tape. See you later.
And that's another set of questions altogether. Why they decided?
That's right. I don't know what happened there, whether they were uniformed police or detectives. Or they did the inquiry, but it seems a strange way to do it. Anyway, so GIPA, while it gives you legislative rights to do things, it also gives the council legislative rights and outs of why they shouldn't release certain information. So first of all, making a formal application. So yes, it does, as Maree says, you've got to give up your firstborn. Maybe that's not quite right, but for your average Joe, it's, I've got to pay for the groceries and wash the car. Why would I waste my time?
Exactly.
They
should be free.
The legal process doesn't make it any easier. The legal process always works like it's the 1920s. So, for example, I've got one. He made the lodgement. I sent him all the documents. They go, oh, no, it's got to be written and sent in an envelope with the stamp of the Queen on it. So I've got to go back there and print all this stuff out and send it to the registry. So it's an arcane sort of process. But for $30, you can put it in. Now, even on putting the $30, the council can play little games like the council here. You put it in today, about 12 days later, you'll get a response back saying, oh, no, your application's invalid because you didn't pay your money. Now, you can't pay your money when you put your application in. You've got to pay your money after. So you've got to go, okay, I'm ready to pay. Okay, we'll now send you an invoice. And that takes another 10 days. So they'll send you the invoice, you pay it online. Then they'll wait 10 days and come back and go, oh, now we've got your money will start. So it's very much a lot of games are played. So when you put the application in, you've got to be specific about what you want. Now, you can't put in one that requires the council to provide new information. So you can't say, I want you to give me a summary of everything that's ever happened at the council for the last 30 years. Not going to happen. You've got to ask for documents, and you've got to say things like, I want all documents relating to whatever it is between certain date range, between 1 January and 30 January, whatever. So you've got to know whatever this thing happened or the alleged thing happened, may have happened. And they can be quite cunning and say, it happened on the 1st of February, so it's outside the date range, so we don't have any documents. That's another trick they play. And so you can't say, I want everything. So they do have a right to knock back a thing if it's going to take all the resources of council the next 50 years to try and process this application. So there's a reality check about what you can ask for. And again, in the book, that's explained, not a plug for the book.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so there's that. What can you ask for? It's information that's documented or recorded in something. Okay, so you could ask for a video of something. You can ask for staff reports and advice on council decisions. So if there's been an email trail between staff and councillors and the CEO and paper written and presented, you can ask for that whole trail of information. You can ask for expense claims and allowances. And I've done this. I've got the travel documents for the mayor and her lodging of the applications. You can ask for the CEO's correspondence to staff. Both them, there may be notes. Now, nobody takes notes anymore because they're aware of these sorts of acts, so they do everything they can. I think, Maree, we've got an example of the Pink Ladies had a secret phone app where they talk, but they wouldn't put anything in writing, put anything in email. So that's another trick that you may say.
I think they were particularly shocked when they found out that their WhatsApp conversations that they thought were encrypted end to end were used as fairly solid evidence about the way that they spoke about people and how they transferred messages to each other to get these jobs effectively. So
there was some shocking revelations in that what they thought was private. So you can ask for contract and tender documents. Now there's outs for that, and you can ask about complaints and their outcomes. And again, there are outs for council on that. So the council can refuse on a number of grounds.
Perhaps just while Steve's searching for that, I might segue to councillor obtaining information. So councillors don't tend to use the GIPA process because in theory they're internal and they have access to information, right? You would think so. But no, the councillors obtain their information from specifically designed email through to the council to ask questions. So if you get a bunch of business papers or a large agenda with 700 pages in it and you're reading through and you want to ask a question, get some more information about an item, then you shoot through an email to an administrative, there's an executive area, and you shoot that through and the executive gets it and they shoot it out to a director who comes back to you with some kind of response. Now, should that response not be what you're happy with, your only alternative is to go to the GM and say, I'm not really happy with that. Please provide more information. Another couple of days goes away. Next thing you know, you've got your council meeting and you haven't got that information.
Too late.
It's too late for you. And there's not a Q&A situation or an area for general business in a council meeting. You are absolutely restricted to the debate on the agenda and you can be shut down if you start to ask questions. So we tend, as councillors, I certainly don't use the GIPA process because we allegedly had much easier access to information when that in fact is not true. We had
and it's too late. Yeah, my GIPA was over an email allegedly sent by one councillor to the CEO, allegedly offering him a job, which was what prompted the dismissal of Miss Stevens. I never got that email, but I got emails around it, which you'd say that looks interesting. But that took 12 months. So when you're in council, you've got a hot issue before you. You're not going to come back 12 months later, go, look, I've got it. It's quite difficult. So just some of the things that the council can do to, if you like, frustrate the process. There are specific things, and there are very good reasons in the legislation why you can't get the documents. One of the first ones is that it's got to be in the public interest. Now, the public interest that we normally have is about open government, about democracy, about transparency, about financial issues. So there's a presumption that a lot of this is in the public interest, but the council can come back and say things like your claims are too vague, they're generic assertions with no specific evidence of harm, which is hard to challenge. So in my NCAT challenge, that was one of the issues that they'd misinterpreted the public interest claim. The next one is legal professional privilege, which is generally is accepted if somebody's seeking legal advice, that legal advice is in confidence. Now, there's then a question about what is actually legal advice and what's just a conversation between two officers. But they'll try and roll around saying, oh, no, this has got legal professional privilege, particularly if it's around a contract or a tender. They'll say it's a bit confidential commercial information. And this is again used, they'll try and do a blanket refusal on issues because they're saying, oh, no, it's going to impact badly on a tender or whatever else. It's going to lose commercial and confidence, their superior ability to do this stuff. If it becomes public, they're going to lose business. So they'll try that one. personal privacy, which is, there's two sides to this. I think I try, when I put my applications in, I specifically say I do not want citizens' names, addresses, or whatever else.
Yeah.
They try and say Smith has got personal privacy when they made this. That's bullshit. That's incorrect. If they're executing council business, that's not personal private information. That's council business. That's their role. That's their job. So I've had to fight on that, and you normally would win on that one, but you've got to convince NCAT that that's in fact right. Information doesn't exist or can't be located. Now, I've got one currently on this where I know there's correspondence between the Ombudsman and the council, but I didn't pick up in the first instance that communication between the Ombudsman and the council is exempt from the Act. So they don't have to tell you that they've actually got it. They can just say there's no such thing, because the whole thing's exempt from the Act. So that's also ICAC, OLG investigations, etc. Can't get it because with the performance of justice, which it's okay.
And perhaps if I might stop you there, Steve, for a minute, I think you jumped part of a process. For people who don't understand the GIPA process going to NCAT. Now, NCAT, of course, is the Commission Appeals Tribunal, the New South Wales Emissions Tribunal, that deals with issues such as unsatisfactory GIPAs or things like that. So I think that's an important point to remind people. When you were frustrated by the council blocking you at everything, the next step for you to take was the NCAT.
To NCAT. That's a tribunal. So it's on the hierarchy of courts. You've got the High Court and Courts of Courts, and then you've got tribunals. And the members and senior members, generally well qualified, like quasi judges, if you want.
Quasi
magistrates.
They're registrars, effectively.
Yeah, quasi registrars in some of the acts that actually issue search warrants and whatever else. So they're competent people who know a bit about the law. So that's the gist of commissioners and senior members and members.
You and I can have a debate offline about that.
Okay, that's right. We did see the AAT go down a politically captured element from the previous Liberal government, which caused this government to clear fell the whole lot and start again. So the other one is excessive fees. There is a charge rate that they apply, X amount of dollars an hour to search, X amount of dollars to photocopy, whatever else. I had, in my case, I tried to say, look, they were going to charge me for legal advice, and my argument was employ competent lawyers. This isn't a training exercise. I'm not paying them to go and get educated on issues. They should know this. And if they don't know it, you should put the work to somebody who does know. Also, they'll try and force you into the formal parts so that you've got to pay. And they then use people's fears that they're going to be up for thousands of dollars to get information that may or may not be of any use. Now, I've overcome it by having members of the I actually contribute to a fund. So very generously, people have contributed money. So I've got to be careful how I do it, but I'm using funds that have been provided to put in the application fees. You can also get a discount on certain 50% discount, largely around the public interest. And that public interest is pretty generous from NCAT. NCAT will say, look, if you're trying to promote an understanding of how public money spent, that is in everybody's interest, so therefore you should get the discount. So that's the grounds for that. And now what we've seen here in the Shoalhaven has been interesting. We've actually seen councillors trying to claim that GIPA is so expensive that people should be banned from using it, as if the council's got control over it. Now, I could talk about the council that put that up and say she had no bloody idea what's going on. But Andrew Constance also bought into this, and he bought into it such a way that, in my case, Prothero v Shoalhaven Council, he went on 2ST and made some grand statements about this fabulous win for council, which in fact were nonsense. It wasn't a grand win for council. In fact, I won new documents. The issue about release of information, it was for publication on Facebook, was actually very positively spoken about by the member, but he declined the release of certain information because it did relate to James Repry, and they thought maybe that would impact on his future employment. So on balance, I was quite happy with that, but that's now being used by the council and others as saying, oh, you're going to put it on Facebook, no, you can't have it, because it may cause harm. What they're not seeing is the direct link between information release and harm. It's a useful tool.
But I think the main crux of all of this, to wrap that in a bow, is that transparency is about people engaging in transparency. First, an organisation has got to be free and open and be transparent and also have accountability. for their behaviour. And then second of all, our beloved community out there has to take some responsibility for what is happening in their council. They appointed the people to sit at the top, the CEOs sitting there controlling the operational area, and we're out here paying our rates, expecting a certain level of service and a certain level of behaviour is another important thing. And if we're not getting it, Steve has articulated a way of asking why we're not. So I think this is what we're asking for. I think my beloved Hatzigersos said today, transparency and accountability are the two key issues that he lives and breathes. And I think that from us, Steve and I, we also are breathing that. And Stephen is providing you the tools to be able to ask for that and get it.
Yeah, that's right. We need to be engaged. I think we said this in episode 1. If we're not engaged in democracy, we'll get the democracy we deserve, which will end up no democracy at all. So you've got to be active. And I guess for a place like the Shoalhaven, where you have a lot of retired people, a lot of smart people, it's a nice hobby to keep an eye on the local democracy.
Yep.
So over to you for our send-off for this week.
That's all from the Gits in your gallery today. Hope you've enjoyed this interesting segment, and we're looking forward to bringing you some more.
Thank you very much. Until next week.
Ciao for now.